Let me tell you something powerful. You don't need to raise your voice, overgive, or prove yourself in loud performative ways to show your worth in a relationship. Because true strength,
It whispers.
it doesn't scream. And when it comes to love, real love, your actions are the proof, not your promises. In a world that's addicted to noise, validation, and public displays, I want you to understand this. Your quiet consistency, your integrity, your still presence, that's where your value lives. Let's talk about the 9 silent actions that don't just tell your loved one who you are. They remind them of your irreplaceable worth.
1.
You respect their space without needing to be asked. Maturity is knowing when closeness is needed and when space is sacred. You don't cling, you don't chase, you hold the relationship like water in your palm, firm, not forceful. And that silent respect, that speaks volumes about your emotional intelligence. 2, you follow through on what you say. It's not the grand gestures, it's the text you actually send, the plan you actually show up for. Trust is built in these quiet follow-throughs. Your word is your contract, and you honor it. 3, you take care of yourself, mentally, physically, spiritually. Your self-respect teaches them how to treat you. When they see you prioritize your wellness, your boundaries, your goals, they don't just feel safe with you, they admire you. And admiration, that's the most magnetic form of desire. 4, you make room for their vulnerability without trying to fix it. Silence can be shelter. Sometimes, presence says more than any advice could. You listen, you don't interrupt, you don't try to become the hero. You simply allow them to feel seen. That's a real emotional safety. 5, you stay grounded in conflict. When things get tense, you don't escalate, you breathe deeper. You communicate clearly and calmly. You show, through silence and poise, that the foundation is strong enough to hold a storm.
You don't need to win the argument.
You care about protecting the bond. 6, you are unapologetically honest, but never cruel. There's a quiet kind of bravery in honesty. No manipulation, no passive aggression, just clear truth delivered with kindness. Because clarity isn't harsh, it's a gift, and it proves that you respect the connection enough to be real. 7, you never compete for attention. You don't beg to be seen, you are seen. Because your energy doesn't demand, it draws in. You show your worth by being a presence that doesn't need to convince. You don't try to outshine, you simply shine. You celebrate their wins without insecurity. Jealousy is loud. Insecurity is louder. The quiet confidence. That's powerful. You uplift, you support, you stand beside, not behind. Because when you know your value, you don't fear being overlooked. You let love breathe, not suffocate.
You don't micromanage the relationship.
You don't keep score. You give love with the strength of someone who knows. If it's real, it will stay. If it isn't, you'll still be whole. That kind of love, the unclingy, unshaky, unafraid love, is unforgettable. Listen to me carefully. You don't need louder words. You need deeper presence. Let your silence be rich with meaning. Let your actions carry weight. Show up as the calm in a chaotic world. Be the anchor, be the peace, be the proof. Because the truth is, your worth was never in how much you're wanted. It's in how powerfully you show up without ever demanding to be needed. Now go. Live like you already know your value. And the right ones? They'll feel it without you ever having to say a word. Presence over performance. You don't need grand gestures or loud declarations. Quiet consistency, showing up, being present, following through is the foundation of trust and respect. You want to make them feel something without saying a word? Start here. Most people believe love must be loud, full of constant reminders, clingy behaviors, long text messages, or exaggerated affection. But the deepest, most unforgettable relationships don't rely on volume. They're built on something quieter, steadier, and far more powerful: presence. You don't have to perform love to prove love. You just have to live it every single day in the smallest, most consistent ways. Think about it. Who do we feel safest with? It's not the one who makes the biggest declarations, but the one who shows up even in silence, especially in silence. There's something deeply intimate about the kind of person who is fully present without being dramatic. They don't need attention to validate their role in your life. They don't crave constant reminders, and they don't ask you to constantly reassure them. Their energy says, I'm here, I see you, I choose you, and they do it again and again without spectacle. This kind of presence creates intimacy that's hard to find and even harder to forget. It's the kind that fills a room without trying. The kind that, even in silence, makes you feel understood. It's the person who reaches for your hand at the right moment. The one who anticipates what you need, not because you asked, but because they paid attention. That's presence. That's emotional fluency. Now imagine what that does in a relationship, especially in the bedroom. Because intimacy isn't just about the physical, it's about feeling safe, seen, grounded. When someone brings calm consistency into the relationship, it makes their touch more powerful, their silence more meaningful, their presence more desired. Why? Because it's not performative, it's intentional. That intention is one of the most erotic energies you can carry. It says, I'm not here to impress, I'm here to connect. I'm not here to overwhelm you, I'm here to hold you. That's what makes presence magnetic. It draws someone in, not with pressure, but with quiet gravity. It gives them the space to relax, to breathe, to want more. There's a whole different level of intimacy that unfolds when you stop trying to constantly do and start focusing on how you are. It's in the way you enter the room and bring peace with you, in how you listen fully, undistracted, and how you touch, not out of need, but out of grounded desire. Your presence doesn't have to be loud to be felt. In fact, the more rooted you are in yourself, the more powerful your energy becomes without needing a single word. Your stability becomes the safety net. Your stillness becomes the place they want to rest. And when you hold that kind of grounded, unshakable space, everything about you becomes more desirable. When you bring that presence into intimate moments, physical or emotional, it changes the entire dynamic. You stop being just a participant, and you become the environment, you become the feeling, you become the memory they return to when they close their eyes. Not because you said the right things, but because you showed up in a way that few ever do, fully, quietly, and with unwavering depth. So when they're with you, they don't just feel connected, they feel chosen, and not in a flashy, over-the-top way, but in a quiet way that lingers, in the way you held eye contact and didn't look away, in the way your hand stayed on their back for a second longer, in the way you simply made space for them to be without expectation. Your true worth isn't in how many times you say, I love you. It's in how you make someone feel when you say nothing at all. How your presence alone eases their mind. How your energy tells the truth before your words do. That's the kind of intimacy that doesn't fade. That's the kind of closeness that people crave but rarely name. In a world where everyone is trying to be seen, presence is what makes you unforgettable. Not because you tried to impress, but because you became the person who didn't need to. Respectful space builds emotional safety. Giving space without pulling away proves emotional maturity. It says, I'm here, but I don't need to control or consume you. That kind of calm presence feels safe and powerful. You want to show someone your value? Give them something rare, unpressured space. In relationships, the loudest mistake people make is thinking closeness means constant closeness. That intimacy requires constant attention. That love is proven by how tightly you hold on. But the truth is, the ones who are hardest to forget are the ones who knew exactly when to lean in and when to step back. Giving space isn't about stepping away from someone. It's about respecting their emotional rhythm. It's about saying, I trust you to breathe without me hovering. And that kind of silent trust, that's one of the most intimate things you can offer. It means you're grounded enough in yourself that you don't need to micromanage the relationship. You're not addicted to control, and you're not anxious about silence. Instead, you become the person whose love breathes, not suffocates. There's an undeniable kind of allure in being with someone who knows when not to speak, when not to interfere, when to let things settle, because not every moment needs to be filled. Not every pause needs a rescue. In intimacy, knowing when to pull back creates more depth than always pushing forward. That's emotional maturity, and it's sexy as hell. In the quiet distance, desire grows. Space creates pull. It creates the room for someone to choose you again, not because they're pressured, but because they feel safe enough to come back on their own. That's when love becomes a conscious decision, not an obligation. That's when they don't just feel wanted, they feel respected. And when you give space in a relationship, you communicate something powerful without even opening your mouth. I am not afraid of your independence. I don't need to be needed. I choose to be here. I am whole, even when we're apart. That kind of energy is irresistible because it allows your loved one to exist as their full self, not just as half of a pair. And when people feel free, they trust deeper. When they trust deeper, they open wider. When they open wider, intimacy takes on a whole new shape.
Think about it. How do you build deep sensuality?
It's not by crowding someone. It's not by constantly being around them, over-explaining your love, or demanding their presence. It's through energy that invites, not energy that invades. When you give them space mentally, emotionally, even physically, you're giving them permission to process, to reflect, to come to you with their whole heart, not just a fragmented version that was pressured into connection. And that kind of connection, that's the one they'll crave. That's the one they'll remember when they lie awake at night. It's in the subtle details, in how you don't rush them to talk when they're quiet, in how you don't flood them with questions when they need time to think, in how you don't push for closeness when they're emotionally withdrawn. You hold the space, you respect the moment, you stay soft, grounded, and open. And in doing so, you create a space they want to walk back into. Because the truth is, when someone gives you space and still stays emotionally available, that's rare. Most people confuse distance with disconnect, but real intimacy says, I'll give you your air and I'll be here when you're ready to breathe with me again. That's when love turns magnetic. You're not in their face, you're in their mind. You're not begging for closeness, you're building longing. You're not demanding reassurance, you're cultivating trust. You let them feel the edges of your presence, even when you're not beside them. And that feeling, it lingers. In physical intimacy, too, space plays a vital role. Desire builds in the pause. Craving grows in the wait. When you're not always available, when you don't overwhelm with touch or need, your affection becomes more meaningful. Your touch becomes deliberate. Your presence becomes a gift, not a given. You don't need to fill every moment to make your love known. Let there be silence. Let there be breath. Let there be mystery. When you give someone the gift of unpressured space, you're not pulling away. You're pulling them closer with something far more powerful than words: emotional security. Because the person who can be present without being pushy, available without being overbearing, intimate without being invasive, that person becomes unforgettable, not because they tried to control the connection, but because they respected it enough to let it evolve naturally, without force. Self-respect is the loudest love language. Taking care of your mental, emotional, and physical well-being silently teaches your loved one how to value you. Self-care is not selfish, it's instructive. You want to raise the standard of how you're treated in love, start by raising the standard of how you treat yourself. Most people think showing your worth in a relationship is about what you give to the other person. Your time, your love, your attention. But here's the truth. How you care for yourself teaches your partner how to care for you. This isn't just about bubble baths and spa days. This is about the way you speak to yourself when no one's listening, the way you carry yourself when no one's watching, the way you respect your own body, your boundaries, your needs, before expecting anyone else to. Because intimacy isn't just about how you touch them, it's about how you hold yourself. Self-respect is sexy. There is something deeply magnetic about a person who knows their value and doesn't perform for approval. Someone who walks into the room already whole, already grounded, already clear on who they are. You don't need to demand attention when you move with inner alignment. You don't need to chase closeness when you've built intimacy within. When you treat yourself like you matter, you shift the energy in every relationship you enter. Suddenly, you're no longer hoping someone else will validate you. You've already done that for yourself. And that energy is rare. It's powerful. It creates an atmosphere around you, one where love feels less like an obligation and more like an elevation. This is what makes emotional and physical connection feel safe and intoxicating at the same time. When someone gets close to you, they're not stepping into chaos, they're stepping into clarity. And in the intimacy of that clarity, their desire doesn't just grow, it deepens. Because being close to someone who honors themselves makes everything feel more intentional, more real, more worth surrendering to. That's where the real heat begins. You want to be the one they think about after they leave the room, then be the one who carries yourself like someone who doesn't need to be chosen to feel complete. Your self-care becomes an aura. Your self-worth becomes a presence. Your self-respect becomes a standard they either rise to or step away from. In the physical realm of love, this shows up in how you communicate your needs without shame, in how you prioritize your pleasure as much as theirs, in how you don't shrink or stay silent when something doesn't feel right. You hold your standards with quiet power. You express your desires with grace and certainty. You know you're not just there to please, you're there to be met. And this shifts the entire energy of the connection. You stop begging for scraps of attention. You stop over-explaining why you deserve care. You stop over-giving in hopes of being seen. Instead, you become the reminder. Every action, every boundary, every moment of stillness becomes a mirror. This is how I love me. If you want a place in my world, this is how I expect to be loved too. And people either rise or reveal they never could. When you take care of yourself emotionally, you stop bringing your unhealed wounds into intimacy and expecting someone else to fix them. You don't place the weight of your identity in their approval. You don't confuse closeness with codependence. Instead, you show up as someone who's already chosen themselves fully, and that makes your love feel less like a responsibility and more like a gift. When you nourish yourself physically, the confidence that radiates from you isn't just visible, it's felt. Confidence is contagious. The way you carry yourself, the way you move, the way you touch and allow yourself to be touched, it all becomes infused with intention. And intention is irresistible. You're not in the room to be validated. You're in the room because you belong there. That changes everything. And when you care for yourself spiritually, mentally, when you take time to reflect, to grow, to be still, you become someone whose inner world is rich enough to hold space for another without losing yourself in the process. You stop giving out of emptiness. You start connecting from overflow. You stop confusing constant closeness with love. You begin choosing only the kind of intimacy that aligns with your highest self. So when someone steps into your life, they're not just stepping into a relationship. They're stepping into a vibration, into a standard, into an experience that you created first with yourself. And that kind of intimacy, that's the kind that doesn't fade when things get hard. That's the kind that leaves fingerprints on the soul because it's not rooted in desperation. It's rooted in dignity, in grounded self-love, in the quiet but powerful decision to never abandon yourself, not for anyone, not even in the name of love. Common conflict shows inner strength. When tension rises, your grounded response becomes a mirror of emotional control. You prove your worth by valuing peace over ego and connection over being right. You want to deepen intimacy in a way that words can't reach? Then stop trying to fix, solve, or explain, and start simply holding space. Because one of the most underrated, powerful, and intimate things you can do in a relationship is to give someone the freedom to feel without trying to manage their feelings. You don't have to be their therapist. You don't have to be their rescuer. You don't even have to have all the answers. You just need to be safe. There's a rare kind of connection that happens when you allow someone to be vulnerable with you, without needing to rush in and make it better. We live in a world that's constantly telling people to cheer up, stay strong, move on. But what most people crave deep down is someone who says, without speaking, you don't have to hide here. I can handle the full version of you. That kind of emotional presence is intimacy. It's the unspoken message that says, I'm not uncomfortable with your mess. I don't flinch at your silence. I don't shrink in the face of your sadness. I can hold it. I can hold you. That's the intimacy that builds trust, not over time, but in a moment, in one deep breath, in one long pause, in one soft look that says, I'm not going anywhere. And when you show up with that level of calm, grounded energy, something shifts between you because vulnerability is risky. Most people don't open up because they've been met with judgment, correction, or abandonment. But when you do the rare thing, when you offer steady presence instead of reactive advice, you instantly become different. They lean in closer. Not because you said the right thing, but because your energy told the truth. I see you, and I'm still here. In a moment of emotional vulnerability, your silence can be louder than any speech. It says you don't have to perform for me. It says you don't need to put yourself back together for my comfort. It says you can be raw, broken, messy, and still completely safe in my presence. And that level of acceptance, that's what undresses someone's soul. Most people rush to give advice because they want to help or because they feel uncomfortable with someone else's pain. But that's not love. That's anxiety disguised as support. Real love is patient. It knows that the most intimate thing you can do isn't offering a solution, but offering space. Imagine what that does to your connection. When they're crying and you don't panic, when they're quiet and you don't force them to speak, when they're angry and you don't match their fire, you become the calm. You become the oxygen in a moment where everything feels suffocating. And that presence, that stays with them. Long after the moment passes, long after the storm clears, you become the person they think of when they need peace. Not because you gave them answers, but because you gave them permission to be human. That's where physical intimacy also transforms, because when someone feels emotionally safe, their body responds. Trust is the root of sensuality. And when they trust you with their tears, with their silence, with their unfiltered truth, they begin to trust you with more. Your presence becomes a haven, a place where their guard can drop, where touch feels like comfort instead of performance, where closeness feels like home instead of pressure. When you don't interrupt their vulnerability with discomfort, you give them the freedom to fully unfold. And that unfolding is sacred. You don't rush it. You don't question it. You don't label it. You just stay right there, fully present, not as a fixer, but as a witness. And let's be clear, this takes strength. It takes discipline, not to jump in and make things better. It takes emotional intelligence to know that not everything needs a solution, especially not in the moment. Sometimes what someone needs most is your breath beside theirs. Your heartbeat staying steady when theirs is racing. Your eyes not turning away when theirs are filled with pain. That's not passive. That's power. Silent, steady, grounded power. The way you make someone feel during their most unguarded moments becomes the blueprint for how they see love. If love feels like pressure, they'll close up. If love feels like control, they'll rebel. But if love feels like freedom to feel, then they'll open, soften, surrender.
And that surrender?
That's where the deepest form of intimacy lives. Not in the peak of pleasure, but in the quiet moment before, when they know they're safe, when they know they don't have to be anything but themselves, when they look at you and realize, I've never felt this kind of permission before. Unshaken confidence doesn't compete. You don't chase attention, and you don't shrink yourself. Your silent confidence is magnetic. It attracts rather than demands. You shine without shouting. You want to be unforgettable in love. Don't just bring passion, bring peace. Anyone can light a fire. Not everyone knows how to hold space when the storm hits. And in relationships, the real test of intimacy isn't in the perfect moments, it's in the hard ones. It's in the tension, it's in the conflict. It's in those sharp, messy, emotionally charged spaces where most people either explode or disappear. But you stay. And not just stay, you stay grounded. There's nothing more powerful, more intimate, more magnetic than someone who can meet conflict without chaos, who doesn't raise their voice just to feel heard, who doesn't use silence as punishment, who doesn't weaponize emotions to gain control. That kind of energy is rare, and in a world full of emotional reactivity, it stands out like a lighthouse, calm, unshaken, clear. Because real emotional maturity doesn't need to dominate, it doesn't need to win, it doesn't seek to be right at the cost of connection. Instead, it leans in, it listens, it breathes. And in doing so, it creates a kind of intimacy that can't be built in peace alone. It's forged in the fire of disagreement.
Think about this.
When tension rises and you don't match the chaos, you instantly shift the power in the room. Not by overpowering, but by anchoring. You become the safe place even when emotions are high. Your tone stays even. Your body remains soft. Your presence says, we can work through this without destroying what we've built. That doesn't mean you're passive. It means you're emotionally fluent. It means you know how to speak love in moments. Most people speak fear. It means you know how to slow down when everything inside of you wants to speed up. That's what turns a lover into a partner. That's what takes a relationship from surface to soul deep. Because let's be honest, anyone can be sweet when things are smooth, but the person who can hold a disagreement without disrespect, who can stay emotionally available while feeling triggered, who can say, I'm hurt, but I still care about protecting this connection, that person is unforgettable. And the intimacy that comes after a moment like that, it's next level. Because when someone sees that you can be trusted not just with their love, but with their anger, their sadness, their doubts, you unlock a deeper kind of closeness. They don't just feel attracted to you, they feel safe with you. And that's the foundation of everything else. In physical intimacy, it's the same. When someone knows that conflict won't turn into punishment, they let go. Their body relaxes, their energy opens because they're not just being touched, they're being held. They're not worried that the tension will ruin the connection. They know it'll strengthen it. And here's the hook. Most people don't know how to handle that level of emotional steadiness because they've never seen it modeled. They've been taught that love means big fights, dramatic makeup sessions, emotional withdrawal, and emotional warfare. So when you bring quiet confidence into a storm, it disarms them. It teaches them, it heals them, and it changes everything. You create a new experience, one that says we can disagree without disconnecting. We can be honest without being cruel. We can face hard truths without tearing each other down. Your calm isn't weakness, it's command. Your stillness isn't avoidance, it's wisdom. Your softness under pressure isn't giving in, it's giving love, its best chance to survive the moment. It's in how you say, let's take a breath, when the words get sharp. It's in how you say, I want to understand, even when you feel misunderstood. It's in how you lean into connection when most people lean away. And what that does, it earns trust, not because you're perfect, but because your energy says, I will protect this bond, even when it's hard. That is where real intimacy grows. That is where passion becomes devotion. That is where emotional safety becomes erotic energy. Because when someone knows they can argue with you and still be loved, when someone sees that you don't use their vulnerability against them, when someone feels that even in conflict, you're still choosing us instead of just me, that's when they surrender. That's when they soften. That's when the physical connection turns into emotional gravity. So it's not about avoiding conflict, it's about who you become in it. Be the one who doesn't flinch. Be the one who doesn't fuel the fire. Be the one who makes love feel like a place, not just a feeling. Because when you bring calm into chaos, you don't just protect the moment, you build the kind of intimacy that lives long after the fight is forgotten.
Love that breathes is love that lasts.
You don't cling, overanalyze, or suffocate. You trust the bond, knowing that real connection doesn't need constant proof. That quiet trust speaks volumes about your worth. You want to be the person they trust the most, not just with their body, but with their soul. Then master the art of honesty, not brutal honesty, not cold honesty, not weaponized truth disguised as just being real. I'm talking about the kind of honesty that's brave and kind at the same time, the kind that creates emotional intimacy instead of tearing it down. In love, truth is either a bridge or a blade, and the difference lies in how you speak it. Most people think being honest means saying whatever comes to mind, without a filter. But real honesty, intimate honesty, is rooted in love, not ego. It's measured, it's mindful, it considers the other person's heart without compromising your own. That's not weakness, that's emotional discipline, and it's rare. There's nothing sexier, nothing more grounding, nothing more unforgettable than someone who speaks the truth, not to hurt you but to build with you. In a world full of half-truths and hidden feelings, someone who's real and tender becomes magnetic because they offer something rare, clarity, and clarity is one of the deepest forms of intimacy. Think about it, how many people do you know who hold things in, stay silent to avoid tension, or speak in circles just to keep the peace? That kind of suppression creates confusion, resentment, and emotional distance. But when someone sits across from you and says, "This is what I feel, and I want you to know it because I care about us," everything changes. Honesty isn't about being right, it's about being real. And being real takes courage, because it means showing your cards. It means risking vulnerability. It means exposing your truth even when you don't know how it'll be received. But that's also what builds trust. Because when someone sees you choosing truth over comfort, they begin to trust not just what you say, but who you are. And that trust, that's the foundation for every other kind of closeness. When you bring honesty into a relationship, you do more than communicate. You create a container where both people can breathe, speak, and grow without fear. You become a safe space where nothing needs to be hidden. Not the needs, not the insecurities, not the desires, especially not the desire. Because let's talk about this in the realm of intimacy. Physical connection without emotional transparency is just performance. But when you can say, "This is what I like," or "This is what I need," or "This is what doesn't feel good for me," that's when the real magic happens. That's when your connection stops being about pleasing each other and starts being about knowing each other. It's not just about honesty in conflict or decisions. It's honesty in softness, in stillness. In those private moments when you look someone in the eyes and share a truth that matters, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. That's where depth lives. And here's what most people miss. Honesty with kindness isn't about sugarcoating. It's about delivery with intention. You can say anything. If you say it with love, you can name your boundary, express your truth, share your discomfort without tearing someone down. That tone, that presence, that care in your voice, that's what creates intimacy. Because it says, even when I'm uncomfortable, I still respect you. So many people lose connection because they avoid the hard conversations. But real closeness isn't born in silence. It's born in the moments you choose to speak up, even when it would be easier to stay quiet. The difference is you do it with softness, with strength, with an energy that says, "I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying this because I care enough to be real with you." In relationships, dishonesty doesn't always look like lies. It looks like hiding what you really feel, downplaying what you need, pretending to be fine when you're hurting, agreeing to things that don't feel right just to avoid conflict. That kind of emotional avoidance kills passion because it creates a distance that can't be filled by touch or time. Only truth can close that gap. When you bring honest communication into the relationship, intimacy deepens. Why? Because the other person never has to guess where they stand. They never have to wonder what you're holding back. You become consistent, reliable, emotionally transparent, and that creates relief. It allows them to open up too, to stop performing, to stop pretending. That's when true connection begins. And it goes both ways. When you create that kind of honesty, you also invite it. People mirror emotional safety. When someone feels they won't be judged, shamed, or attacked for speaking their truth, they will speak it. And in those moments, even the hard truths become bonding experiences. Because they weren't spoken with cruelty, they were spoken with care. So many relationships struggle because people wait too long to say what's real. But when you make honesty your daily rhythm, not just in hard times, but in everyday moments, you become trustworthy, you become solid, you become someone they can relax with, someone they can tell their secrets to, someone they can fully show up with. No masks, no fear. That's what honesty does. It doesn't just keep the relationship clean, it keeps it intimate. Because when there are no hidden thoughts, no unspoken resentments, no silent fears, love flows differently. Desire flows differently. Touch feels safer. Eyes stay locked longer. Conversations last deeper. The whole relationship softens and sharpens at the same time. And the person who brings this kind of truth into a relationship, they become unforgettable. Not just because they were honest, but because they were honest with heart. They made it safe to be seen. And in doing so, they created the kind of intimacy most people spend their whole lives searching for.